Bill, thank you very much for joining me today on this episode of Muskingum Rising. Really intrigued by the team, by what you're doing, what I think Coach Gunderson is trying to build, and so your perspective is invaluable to me. So thanks again for taking the time in the midst of all of your soccer and your probably heavy load of studies.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
yeah, not a problem. Um, So, I always say, why don't you do the heavy lifting? Why don't you introduce yourself? The standard stuff, name, hometown, major, favorite color, or whatever it might be.
Okay, so I'm a sophomore. I'm from Wellington, Ohio. I'm an accounting major. I play holding mid for the Muskies, and and that's about it. Yeah.
You're from where, Ohio?
Wellington, Ohio.
Wellington, Ohio.
Uh,
Where does Wellington lie?
about 45 minutes south of Cleveland, so kind of in the Oberlin area. If you know where Oberlin College is.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I went to school at one of your rivals, so I know sort of that general area by the schools pretty much, not by towns. So that's so okay. All right. So let's just get straight to it. Maybe from your perspective, do you notice a difference? And what are is that if you haven't, that's fine too. uh, Between last year and this year's team.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can see it in the statistics even. We were after like even the first scrimmage, we were going back and looking at our ball possession as well as passes in like games last year versus games this year, and in teams where we were like relatively close. I think it was Baldwin Wallace we looked at, I'm not sure. But even our ball possession in a game like that last year was worse than our ball possession in a game against Denison this year. And that's like a very, very good team. So even though the result of even that game wasn't maybe what we were hoping for and doesn't look like a lot of progress, the possession that we're doing and the passing and just kind of connecting with each other has been a million times better this year.
Mhm.
And I think that's very apparent in our statistics and some of the results we've had just based on like we played William and Jefferson last year. We played Earlham last year, and those were both losses, close games, but we've turned that into a result this year. And I think keep going on that trend, we are definitely seeing improvement.
Yeah. I will say I watched the last year's game and this year's game, and it's two totally different teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say too, like Worcester was that's the game I was at. Great team, and
Mm-hmm.
right. I mean, you held your own in a lot of ways, and I appreciated how you were trying to control the tempo as best you could, and I thought that was noticeable, and that was different from last year. I thought was a little bit haphazard and still trying to find your legs and figure things out. So very noticeable from my standpoint. So the segue to that is, and it sounds like you're pretty pleased, but how do you think the team has played overall so far in the 7 games that you've played?
Yeah. And again, I definitely think it's better than last year. I do think that there are areas that we still are improving on and still need to get together before we enter into the OAC, but I think we have plenty of time to work on those things. Last night at Earlham, we had moments where it was really good and a few areas where we kind of like tapered off and against maybe a different team that could have really cost us. So I do think that's something we need to keep focusing on, but overall, I think it's looking really good.
Yeah. That's funny that you said that because I think Washington and Jefferson was that they punished you
Mm-hmm.
at those times. Hang on, sorry, had another game going. Had They punished you at times when you were sort of on. You were having those moments where you were trying to figure things out, and then I think you just recovered really well, right? Coming back 3-1 down to 3-3, but I do think that's one of those games you grab at some point, right? Like I think that's one that you grabbed. All of that game is one that you grab as well. Um, okay, so so to me, I just was looking at some stats. So you're currently 2-2-3, and correct me if I'm wrong because I can very well be wrong. You have 3 ties. Washington, Jefferson, Olivet, and Earlham yesterday.
Yeah.
Was that yes?
Yesterday
Earlham was
the
yesterday. Before your game, your win against Bluffton, I thought you could be 3-2 at this point. You're close. Like I said, there are two of those ties I didn't think should be ties. I think you should have definitely buried all of that when you had the chance. But I'm not going to blame you. And then you beat Bluffton. You tied Earlham. And so last year, I went back to last year, and I'm thinking, hey, progress. What's progress? You were 1-6 at this time last year, which is pretty darn remarkable. You have another couple games, right? You play Case, which will be a tough one, and then Kenyon, both at home, which is to your advantage. Has a team talked at all about going into the OACs? Or are you just so focused on the next game?
Yeah, it's mostly that. I think we like to take things one game at a time, kind of focus on like who our next opponent is. I think we definitely have the goal in the back of our minds to make it to the OAC tournament this year, as I think Morgan touched on her interview. But right now we're kind of focused on Case Western, and then following that game will be Kenyon.
Yeah. Do you feel like there? So I'm super confident. Like, I'm just a generally confident guy, right? So I look at that and I think, man, you made so much progress from year over year. Do you feel confident? Does the team feel a little bit more confident maybe than last year?
Yes, absolutely. I think given that we've played some of the teams we played last year and come out with a different result already, and there were a lot of close games last year in the OAC, I think we're feeling pretty good about our ability to compete this year.
Yeah. I think, right, Morgan said the goal is to make the tournament. Is that still, not that you talk, right, that's one of those that you don't talk about. And except for me, I should not talk about it either. But is that still something that you think the team's gunning for?
Absolutely. I think that's always the goal. I think that would show a lot of improvement if we were able to make that tournament this year.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know. I mentioned this before we started recording, which I'm glad. Yes, we are recording. Like I was there at the game you played against Worcester. You lost 3-0. Last year you lost 5-0. And I thought there were stretches that you held your own, right, as a team. But I think more importantly, I didn't know that Coach Gunderson was going to recommend you or suggest that I reach out to you for this interview. But I noticed you against Worcester because how I think critical role you play in the team's, I'll say, overall defense. I think you're pretty key from a defensive standpoint, but also from an attacking standpoint. I thought you got the ball forward really, really well. Now, and I say that not to, well, maybe, to pat you on the back because I like to see good soccer players, but you're only a sophomore. Like, how does, I mean, you carry, look, in my book, the most important player on the field is your position, is the holding mid, for all the reasons why I said. Like, how does that feel to be a sophomore and have the responsibility like this on you? I mean, did you feel it last year? Do you feel it more this year?
Yeah, so coming in, this is actually a big topic for me because I was actually more of a center back when I came into college. And so being put in that role, because I played a little bit of mid, like in high school and all that, and just like with that pressure, as well as like being a freshman and not really having experienced college soccer before, it was kind of a bit of a transition for me, I think. But this year I feel like I did some stuff over the summer and I've settled in, and along with just like having, Morgan and Hannah and other really great people in the midfield with me, it makes it a lot easier. And I feel comfortable in that role.
You could see, and even Worcester isn't the best game, right? Because I think there were times where you could just tell that they're so quick on the ball. They're so good, right? But you could see something working in the midfield, right? Like there was I don't know if you're necessarily there yet, maybe towards the end, but end of the season you will. but there's definitely something there where you're reading each other and knowing, hey, I know if I just pass the ball to my right, Morgan's going to be there. Or she's going to be making a run down the line. So, yeah. So, okay. So listen, this was fantastic. I told you, nice and easy. Here we are. And really do appreciate you taking the time again today. And know that, as I told Morgan, I told Coach Gunderson, I tell everybody on this thing, you have a fan out in New Jersey who's cheering, right? You see, like, didn't notice the hat, did you? So thank you again for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.